All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Ryan Embree, Marketing Director here at Travel Media Group. Joined with me today by Chief Technology Officer Jason Lee. I'm going to be bringing him into the conversation here just in a second. First off, thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to present this presentation for you, this virtual event, all about AI, guest review response, what Travel Media Group knows, does best. But before we get rolling, whether this is your first, fifth, or 15th webinar, did want to explain the interactive studio that we're in right now. So a couple things that you can go ahead and click on as we're presenting this. First, the best way to engage and see this presentation is hopefully you're seeing both myself as well as the presentation. If you're not, go ahead and click the bottom buttons. You should be able to see that. Also, our links to Jason and I's LinkedIn profiles. We'd love to connect with you. This is our passion. We've both been in the industry for decades now, so really excited to share some of this presentation. And then we've got a virtual event coming up, part of our social success series. Social media is also a digital marketing solution and topic that we love at Travel Media Group. That's going to be done by our brand ambassador, Cassidy Quintana. That's next month. So if you're we have quite a couple management companies on this call. If you want to forward that to whoever runs your social media, we're continuing that. We've got a great subject for you. And if you ever want to talk to us, feel free, click to on a consultation. But we got a lot to cover, so we're going to jump into it. As I mentioned, my name is Ryan Embree, Director of Marketing. With me is Jason Lee, Chief Technology Officer. Jason, thanks for joining me on this webinar.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, we're excited to talk to everyone today. I love this image because I want everyone to first imagine a giant AI spectrum here of knowledge. I am going to be on the far left, maybe some, I use ChatGPT. I've got that knowledge base, a little bit of AI and what we're talking about today. Jason has been a little bit more into the sandbox, playing with it, and is a little bit more knowledgeable. So no matter where you are, all that to say, no matter where you are with AI right now, and we're going to talk through a lot about this today, there is a place for you on this presentation. And if you've been on one of my webinars or a few of my webinars, I love some parallels that we're going to talk to in a second. But let's talk about what we're going to cover today on the agenda. Is all AI created equal? That is the big question that we're going to talk about and hopefully answer for you at the end of this webinar. Implementing AI into the guest experience, right? I'm sure we're getting a lot of pressure from our higher ups, sometimes even our guests. Are we implementing AI technology to make our hotel operations more efficient? 4 questions to ask when considering using AI to respond to your reviews, and 4 red flags to look out for an AI review response. And then ultimately, we're to come to the conclusion, how good is AI at responding to reviews? Now, I'll go ahead, and one of the other features that we did for the first time in this webinar is the emojis at the bottom. Now, with a quick reaction with the emojis, on the right-hand side, how many were able to know that this was an AI-generated image here? And I'll show you in a second here. I'm sure there were a couple clues that gave you an answer. But really, this is actually an AI Canva prompt, so an image generator that we're using, and the prompt was hotel responds to review. Now, one of the things that I want to focus everybody's attention to that we see is that when I asked this AI prompt to give me a response to a review, it actually gave me a 7-star review. Now, kind of silly to us, knowing that we work in a 5-star scale, depending if it's Google or TripAdvisor, which has bubbles instead of stars, I guess. But Booking.com has 1 to 10 scale. So maybe it saw that information and kind of split the difference there. But this is the nuance. I think that little image there is really nuanced to teaching AI hospitality and how these things that we take for granted sometimes aren't necessarily translated as of yet. So, as I mentioned at the top of this webinar, I love parallels. I love trying to, again, very base knowledge of AI. So I'm going to try to spell it out for everyone right here, and do it with baking. I'm not much of a baker. I know, Jason, you're more on the pizza side of things, but today we're going to be baking a cake, right? And just like baking anything, whether it's a cake or pizza, you need ingredients. And there's a difference in quality ingredients. You can get store-bought ingredients, a general value, store-bought cake like you see on the right-hand side, or you can get your Trader Joe's and the like, really high quality. So when we're talking about AI, our ingredients is our data, right? So when it comes to review response, if you are using a model that looks at every single response ever known, you're talking about templates that have been, plaguing our industry now for years. We've talked about defensive responses, really just not good responses or even no responses, right? That's all thrown in to this general data, just like you would find a store-bought ingredients. So the data that you're putting in has a huge impact. Now, secondly, is experience. Like I mentioned, me baking a cake might not come out as good, or actually I know will not come out as good as a 20-year veteran baker who's been doing this, knows all about baking. So exactly what we talked about in that image the second ago, knowing that there's no such thing as a 7-star review in our industry. So you mix those two things together, you get data, experience, and then that comes out your model, right? So very different models create very different outputs, right, Jason? And I know you probably want to speak to this a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'm sure at this point, most people on this call have heard of an LLM, which is a large language model. That's really ChatGPT, Copilot, and a bunch of other ones. And these are all models that are really designed to understand conversational language and take that language in and be able to respond to a prompt or respond to instruction based on what it knows, right? Based on all of this information. And I think, this is such a great analogy because the data that feeds into these, the data that feeds into the LLM itself sort of informs its understanding of language, right? And then the context of that, in our case, would be reviews. But what is it that we're doing with this review? We're responding to the review. But how are we responding, right? What's the emotional base of the response? But then additionally, what's the context in terms of this location, in terms of its amenities and its things? So I think this is such a great analogy because you think about all of these ingredients like data, where the review comes from and what metadata comes with it, how that data is then enriched, and then how does that then get informed? How does that get sent to an LLM, and then what instruction then is sent with it to give you back this optimal output, to give you back this beautiful cake, and the thing that you're actually looking for. And I think that's really it's all of those ingredients together. I think a lot of the models kind of, there's some that are a little better, a little faster, a little more expensive, a little less expensive. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to those primary ingredients, where the data comes from, the context of the instruction, and then, how informed then is that output from all of that.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, if you look at these two images here and ask, are these both cakes? The answer to this is yes, just like potentially AI could produce a response for you. But at what quality do you want to serve your guests, right? Which cake would you rather have? Which cake would you rather be serving your guests? And that's all based on the ingredients or data that you're providing, the model, and obviously with hospitality, a lot of experience goes into this. So as I mentioned again, we're getting a lot of pressure right now, if we're in hospitality, from our bosses to say, are we utilizing AI? We've got that FOMO out there of we are not using AI to the fullest. And hoteliers are trying to figure out every single place in the guest experience, how can I implement and incorporate AI into the guest experience? Now, here's the difference, is when we start considering guest feedback and online reviews into AI, this actually has to deal with every single one of these aspects of the guest experience, right? If I'm implementing Valet AI system to make my parking more efficient, that has nothing to do with the ingredients of my breakfast. Yet, when we're talking about guest feedback and online reviews, you might have a review that talks about both. So you're actually almost complicating, although it might seem like low-hanging fruit to incorporate online guest review response into your AI hotel experience. It's actually one of the most complex places. And if you read these are a couple different pieces of a review that have broken out into every single aspect of the guest experience. And a couple of these are pitfalls, right? Staff was friendly enough. Valet Alex was the best. It was so fun visiting the front desk every time my key didn't work. A little bit of sarcasm there, right? Lobby was crowded and buzzing before the concert. Buzzing, kind of a slang term. The room felt small but worked for us. And then the breakfast had tons of gluten-free options that my wife loved. So again, in this example here, there's a couple terms, and we're going to see a real response in a second, where AI might get tripped up a little bit. Jason, anything to add here?
Just, you said it, that all of these different areas of experience are being expressed in reviews, and how we respond to them, and what is the context of that response, meaning what is it at our property that is this thing, right? So inside of a review, I might just kind of mention something. I might mention that the lobby's buzzing. That may be a good or a bad thing. But one thing that's really important to remember when I was talking about these large language models, like they're designed to understand speech, right? They understand language. But what we're doing is you're also then constraining it down into the context of responding to a review. And just so you know, we've been doing this for a long time, and the text box for a review, right, is wide open. People say literally every and anything inside of those text boxes, and some of them are hotel related, and some of them are not. And so this is where things get very complex, as you said, Ryan. Where the complexity comes into is obviously all of these different areas of your hotel, but also the fact that this input is fully random at times.
Well, we talked about buzzing, how buzzing before the concert's actually a positive kind of sentiment there. Maybe you like that buzzing, but then in the next review, you could talk about a buzzing or a ringing noise coming from your room, which is negative. So these things that might be very easily translatable to someone or a person behind it might trip up the AI a little bit. So here are all of those pieces of feedback and sentiment organized obviously into a review of how we like to see them. And here's the response. And this is actually the response exactly from ChatGPT. And overall, we want to make sure we stress on this. Overall, this is a very passable response, just as I showed you in the last visual, how that cake is a very passable cake from time to time from out of those boxes. But there are some things here that kind of trip you up. Thank you for sharing your experience. We're so glad you and your wife joined us for Concert Weekend. Concert Weekend is one of those terms, not really talking, you don't really say Concert Weekend. We'll be sure to recognize him for making your stay a little bit brighter, talking about Valet Alex. Well, Valet Alex happens to be a female. And this is something our professional writers, our director of Respond and Resolve, our review response solution, spoke to me about. In order not to essentially fall into this trap, they use them every single time. Keyless entry system, another one of those terms that if you're in hospitality, we don't really call it our keyless entry system. And then our team puts a lot of care into offering options for all dietary needs. I think that's a fantastic way to phrase that. But this really leaves on the table an opportunity, especially for those gluten-free, maybe guests that care so much and are looking for this, to put some of the items that is included in your breakfast. So if there's not a place where you can share details about what maybe those gluten-free items and options are, this is a great place to put this. Because you think about maybe someone with a gluten allergy seeing this review, this could be ever so valuable for them and could be the real differentiator from them staying at your property versus the property next door. Jason, anything else about this response before we move on?
No. Yeah, just that I think one kind of key to these types of responses, and we're seeing more and more of them. I'm sure everybody on this call has seen them or has experienced them, maybe in your inbox or whatever. But there are some characteristics like really using like word for word pieces from the review back into the response, it being a bit verbose, but all of those pieces together sort of tip off someone who's in the know that this might not have been written by a person. And it's not to say, like you said, it's not bad at all. And I think these models produce really great results, but it's about, like going back to that original analogy, it's about making sure that you have that expert baker,
Yeah.
that's helping you instruct the LLM to do the right thing and to do it in a way that is conducive to the amenities at your property and to the voice of your hotel.
Well, and here's the thing, Jason, is that, this right here is an average, maybe 3-star review, right? Which could
Right.
compromise, 50 to 60% of your reviews. But what happens, obviously, when these little things that you're like, okay, I can live with it saying concert weekend or getting the gender wrong or even having some weird wording here. What happens with those real issues at the property, right? We've seen just over the last couple of months, some of our hotel partners and respond and resolve team have to deal with slip and falls at the property, disagreements with the staff, and accusations of things like discrimination, payments, double payments, misunderstanding of those incidental charges, right? Something that we all know in hospitality and have to explain time and time again. How do you teach that to an HI system? But we don't want to scare you, obviously, with the negative things. What about those things on the other side of the spectrum, right? Whether it's an anniversary, whether it's a birthday party, whether it's something more serious where they're visiting a sick loved one at the hospital, and that is met with those gaps, right? And they're essentially providing you with this order for this cake, right? This elaborate cake, this genuine cake, and you're just providing them with that box ingredients, right? So these are the type of things that when you look at that average 3-star, yes, it absolutely is possible. But these are the places where service can rise above and can be really shown online here. Anything to add there, Jason?
No, just to kind of build on what you were saying, and that, I think if we think of this, we think about hospitality as connection, as us connecting with our guests and connecting with other human beings. And I do think that as we, the further we get into this side of communication, that it is really important to make sure that you're communicating in a way that furthers that relationship. But I think even more so than that this is really an extension of their experience with you, with your brand, with your location, and that's why this stuff is so important. We take it extremely seriously, maybe more seriously than anybody else on this call. But but I think that's where this stuff really extends itself to, and so that's where, when you're considering these things, it's really important to make sure that is part of that consideration.
Absolutely. So let's get into the 4 questions to ask when considering AI to respond to your reviews. We kind of talked about this one with the example, right? Do your responses sound like AI? And I think one of the things that we saw, Jason, was you made a post the other day on LinkedIn. Again, this is another plug. Make sure you follow Jason. He's got some great insights on AI and review response and social media for hospitality. But you essentially took the time, made this post, and there's a feature on LinkedIn where you can when AI can generate a response to your post. And we saw that regurgitation of your same words were kind of seen there. And whereas, maybe months ago when that AI image that I put up at the very beginning might have seemed innovative and cool, now it's kind of like everyone notices that's AI, right? And we're starting to understand and become fluent in this language of AI. So when you see that, how does that make you feel? How does that make a connection on your LinkedIn or even somebody on social media? If you were to post something deeply personal and then someone respond to you, kind of just regurgitating what you said and knowing that they used an AI. So again, where does that authenticity meter to the left-hand side, where does that fall?
Yeah,
Jason?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just going to say, just again, like the ubiquity of AI communication is really everywhere. And pretty much every platform is offering layers of it, whether it's Salesforce or it's Outlook or Gmail or, or chat,
Yeah.
or even text messages, so, the more we communicate this way, I think the more apparent elements of this are going to become. And, whether or not that cheapens this interaction or not, I think is really becomes the question, and so it's like, if I don't feel like if I feel like this minimal effort was put in to respond to me, or this minimal effort was put in to do something, I might feel differently about it. So, and I think that's where really understanding this technology and how to make it sound good, how to make it not sound like it was, done haphazardly. And what's interesting about it, and I know we have a lot more to talk about, but I think what's interesting about this type of effort is that it's not dissimilar to just regular review response effort. The effort to make something sound right and the effort to make sure that it's correct before it's posted live and sent to a guest, it takes effort and time and consideration and a very deliberate plan.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes it sound different. That's what makes it sound better. So you can use all this stuff to help aid you in making this great, but definitely don't leave it to its own devices.
Yeah, I mean, there might be a time in our email inbox where we're seeing more AI generated messages than actual messages written out, which is a very scary place to be in. And even rewriting things sometimes to make it not sound like you're an AI, right? You could totally see that in the future of like, am I making this sound too much like I'm, we had the same issue with templates back in the day. I think another question to ask is, how is the response being posted online? And I love these analogies, but I'm sure with the first time a computer was introduced and somebody sold everyone on the fact of, one day this computer is just going to be able to electronically mail all of your friends and family everything that you want to tell them. Well, you didn't just get a computer and it do it for you. You had to actually go in, still compose. There were elements to that. And that's what we're seeing right now, is there is a process with how responses are being posted online. 0% response rate to 100% response rate sounds amazing. But if you're still having to go in there, copy the response that's generated for you, go to one of these sites and copy and paste that, is that really saving you time? Kind of like what Jason was saying. So understanding the full process of how the response is being posted online is also important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's what's sort of understated in some of this. So we've seen obviously there's a lot of solutions a lot of AI solutions that are coming into the market. And, so it's like I have the review data and I create a response, but getting that response back to the site that it came from is, that can be tricky. So you still need to be able to get that there. So there's a lot to.
Yeah. Next question is, how do you teach hospitality to AI, right? Think about the amount of time that it takes to teach your staff, to teach your staff the nuances of your, to teach the nuances of your hotel, and how you want your brand to be saying. Excuse me. So how do you teach those nuances like we were talking about, right? That reviews are going to come in at that 5-star and 10 versus 7 stars. There are a lot of things that in hospitality that are different from other industries. So that's why that experience, what we were talking about, matters so well. Right, Jason?
Yep.
And finally, the last question is, what is the reason for responding to your reviews? And this is what we talk to hoteliers, brands, management companies about all day, every day, right? If your reason for responding to review is to just check a box, then guess what? That AI response is going to do the job. Again, these are smart models that are being, and they're passable responses. But if there's a deeper strategy, if there's a deeper meaning of guest acquisition, guest retention, and guest advocacy, then that curated professional post, that more exquisite cake is going to be a better fit for your overall strategy.
Yeah, I mean, what is, and you think about that purpose, and I think this is something that's largely lost as we're doing this, because there's a lot of pressure from your brand, or pressure from the OTA possibly to have these responses happen. But if you think about where the highest ROI is from this activity, it's definitely in guest acquisition. It's definitely in guest retention, right? So building on the advocacy of your guests, showing gratitude for your happy guests, seeking remedy for guests who have these issues. Those things done in a way that is sincere is what resonates. It's what resonates with the guest and builds retention. It's what resonates with the future guest, so that you acquire them, so that this activity has meaning. And I think sometimes that gets lost in all of this. Like, getting it done is the primary factor, but its content and its meaning and what it means to the guest who wrote it gets lost. So this, I mean, I feel like that should be number one, Ryan. But you have that.
Well, they're not in any order, but we are going to
Okay.
look at these AI
Right.
red flags here. One of the red flags is there are no questions being asked about your property details. So this would be, again, one of those companies that just come into the space, not understanding the nuances of hospitality and just saying, we'll go ahead and get you and respond to all of your reviews. And that's the last time you hear any sort of questions about anything. That should be one of the scariest conversations you should have, because every single hotel on this call right now, on this webinar, is different. You have different times for your breakfast. You have different amenities, different locations. Renovations are happening at different times, different policies. These are the things that we ask, that we incorporate in this guideline preview here to the left, so that we can incorporate those details. Gluten-free options was a great example of what we saw, so that we can use those to really tailor and custom your response.
Yeah, I mean, and policies are a huge one in this.
Yes.
So a negative review about somebody not getting or having a deposit or not getting a deposit back for smoking in their room, for example, like, that is your policy. And reiterating that policy for future guests is a really important thing. And really, there's no way for an LLM to know that policy unless you tell it, unless it's informed about what's going on with your property.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this one in a second, so I'll actually save that. There's no human touch at all. This is also a very, very a scary thought and a huge red flag that you should look out for. Even in our Smart Response hybrid review response solution, Smart Response, there is a final human in the loop to make sure that everything that is being posted online is accurate and is not doing harm or damage to your reputation. We talked about those really, really those situations that are very serious, and the reputational harm that can come of that if those aren't appropriately responded to. So making sure that there's at least someone from your staff or someone that you're outsourcing, that there is a human in the loop in this response process.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those places that you don't want to just leave it. You don't want to leave it to do something, and it might be fine 80% of the time, but it's usually that 20%. It's usually that other part of it that guests who are seriously considering staying or not staying at your property are reading and really evaluating. So this isn't the spot to fully let it go.
Another red flag to look out for: repeating negative feedback in the response. We talked about this, this AI regurgitation sometimes in its response, making sure that it's not repeating negative keywords. So, room was dirty. We're sorry you found our room dirty. You do not want your hotel online associated with dirty room, not just once by the guests, but also by your property twice. Could have harmful SEO implications.
Yeah, and I think this goes into this sort of unpredictable input that reviews have, and a lot of times when you have a guest who's like really venting about a negative stay, they might mention multiple elements of the same thing. So they might be talking about the carpet was dirty and the bed was dirty and the windows were dirty, and instead of where an AI would really press into each one of those individually, someone else writing that might be like, hey, we're sorry you had issues with cleanliness in your room. And I think that's where, but that also comes back to, it's not even, the negative side about having those keywords floating around out there, but it's also just about better communication.
Absolutely. And the final one is there's no way to train your AI to respond better, right? So I kind of use this parallel as, if you think of this as a frequency or how you calibrate, and perfect calibration and perfect frequency between your hotel's voice and your response. And without being able to train an AI better, you're always going to have this little gap. You're always going to have those little things, those subtle little things in some ways, maybe bigger. That gap widens when all of a sudden the response or the review is a lot bigger, or it's a more serious review. But there's always going to be that gap if you do not have a way to train your AI to respond better. And that's where, something like Respond and Resolve, our review response solution, along with the expertise, the added notes at onboarding that we get from those details, our client success check-ins, we can make it where that collaboration, that frequency is right in tune with your hotel.
Yeah, and I would kind of build on that. So you think about the largest, most complex LLMs that are out there, probably Copilot and ChatGPT probably leading the way. And we're talking, and probably Gemini, but we're talking billions of dollars spent in the development, ongoing development, and data centers, and the type of compute that gets these right. And there's really nothing better in terms of conversational, like AI, right? Generative AI. So you're not going into those models and recreating, reinventing the wheel, and you're not going to be able to create a model like that. So we're really using these models. We're using these models sort of out of the box, and then modifying them how wherever we need them, and modifying them for these tasks. And for review response, it really does come into these really key points of success. And so while we're able to manipulate the output, right, the actual model itself is out there, like a sounding board to its input. But this, very well said, Brian.
And what we talked about with, a perfect example of this is we get calls all the time talking about somebody's elevator being down for a week, right? And guests now having to use the stairwell to the left of the breakfast area. Try explaining that to an AI that only 1 week the elevator is going to be down, and we're going to direct everyone to the stairwell by the breakfast area. And we talk about efficiency in AI. Having a phone call with someone, a professional who knows hospitality, has done that, is going to be a lot easier to do than trying to explain that and teach and train your AI to respond better. So we're going to end this really where we started with this, right? So we kind of talked about this parallel. When you talk about the data, so important. The data that we use is the 2 million review responses that we've done for our hotel partners for almost a decade. We've had our Respond and Resolve solution responding to online reviews since 2016, and we've served hospitality for over 40 years. So, the model that we've created is this smart response model here, and it is a hybrid solution like we talked about. Excuse me. But at the end of the day, what is better than getting a cake built for you? A whole team of experienced chefs, right? And that's where we really shine at Travel Media Group, is our people. This is an example of the network of professional writers and client success team that is taking not only that cake and serving it to all of our guests across the country, but making it special and making sure that each and every one of your guests are served the appropriate way. So, and at the end of the day, this is why we are trusted by the hospitality's most elite brands. We see this, we've launched this hybrid solution, which, again, if you're at 0% response rate right now for your hotel, Smart Response might be a really great stepping stone for you to get that response rate up. But Respond and Resolve is what our partners are using, because it is the premier solution in hospitality for review response. And again, so proud to announce that we've hit over 2 million reviews. You'll be hearing more about that as we've just crossed this incredible milestone. So any final thoughts today, Jason, before we wrap up?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like I've said too much, Ryan, but I appreciate this great webinar, and hopefully you guys found this educational. But just know, just to kind of again build on to what Ryan has been saying, is that we are really committed to this, and we're committed to providing the absolute very best types of responses for your guests in a way that you would want them done. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that.